There is a structure standing in the desert outside Cairo that has survived longer than any other building on Earth. 2,300,000 blocks of stone. A base covering more than 13 acres. A tomb built for one man that has outlasted every empire that came after it, including the one that built it. And in the last 2 years, people have started asking artificial intelligence systems the same question archaeologists have spent 2 centuries trying to answer. Who actually built this thing, and how did they do it? You've probably seen the videos claiming an AI cracked some hidden code in the pyramid's proportions, some secret math linking it to the size of the Earth, some impossible precision that shouldn't be possible. Most of that is not true. But here's the strange part. You don't need any of it to be true. Because when you strip away the invented numbers and look only at what has actually been proven, what real archaeologists have actually dug out of the sand, the true story is still one of the most incredible engineering achievements in human history. And it raises questions serious historians are still arguing about today. So, let's do this properly. Let's ask what an honest, evidence-based investigation actually finds when it looks at the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not what a viral video wants you to believe. What the stone, the papyrus, the tool marks, and the bones actually tell us. Start with the man this was built for. Around 2560 BCE, during Egypt's 4th dynasty, a pharaoh named Khufu commissioned a tomb on the Giza Plateau. This wasn't the first pyramid. Egyptians had been experimenting with pyramid design for decades before this, through the Step Pyramid at Saqqara and the Bent and Red Pyramids at Dashur, essentially working out the engineering through trial and error, including at least one structural failure. Khufu's pyramid was the culmination of that experimentation, and by the time it was finished, it stood 481 feet tall. For almost 4,000 years, it was the tallest human-made structure on the planet. Nothing else came close until the cathedrals of medieval Europe. For a long time, the biggest gap in the story was the workers. Ancient Greek writers, centuries after the fact, spread the idea that the pyramids were built by slaves under the whip. Hollywood ran with it. But archaeology tells a different story, and it's one worth actually sitting with instead of skipping past. In the 1990s, archaeologists Zahi Hawass and Mark Leaner uncovered a workers' town just south of the plateau, bakeries, breweries, dormitories, and a cemetery for the laborers themselves. The workers buried there were interred with respect, close to the sacred ground of the pyramids, which is not how a society treats slaves. Skeletal analysis showed healed fractures, broken bones that had been set and given time to mend, meaning injured workers were cared for rather than discarded. Administrative papyri found at the Red Sea port of Wadi al-Jarf, dated to Khufu's reign, include what's now called the Diary of Mir, an official who recorded, in his own handwriting, the day-to-day logistics of moving limestone blocks by boat down the Nile to Giza. These are the actual working documents of the construction project, written by someone who was there. Deep inside the pyramid, in relieving chambers never meant to be seen, work crews left graffiti in red ochre paint, names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkor, the nicknames of gangs of laborers who clearly took pride in the work, not people cowering under a whip. So the labor force is not the mystery. What's genuinely difficult to explain, and this is the part that deserves real attention rather than fabricated statistics, is the precision. Not impossible precision. Precision that took extraordinary skill and organization to achieve with Bronze Age tools, and that still impresses professional engineers today. Take the base of the pyramid. It covers over 13 acres, and across that entire footprint, the 4 corners are level to within about 2 centimeters, roughly the width of a couple of fingers, over a distance longer than 2 football fields laid end to end. That's real. It's been measured by modern surveys, and it's a legitimate achievement. Egyptologists have a well-supported explanation for how it was done. Workers likely cut a grid of shallow trenches around the perimeter and flooded them with water, using the naturally level surface of water as a reference line, the same trick a modern builder uses with a laser level, just executed with patience and a very good eye instead of electronics. It doesn't require lost technology. It requires a genuinely skilled team of surveyors who understood exactly how to use the tools they had. The orientation is similarly impressive without needing embellishment. The 4 sides of the pyramid align to true north, south, east, and west with an error of only a few arc minutes, a tiny fraction of 1 degree. Egyptologists, including Kate Spence, have proposed that the builders achieved this using stellar alignment, tracking 2 circumpolar stars as they rotated around the celestial pole on a given night, and bisecting the angle between them to find true north, an elegant, entirely achievable technique for a culture that had spent centuries studying the night sky for religious and calendrical reasons. It required patience and careful observation, not satellites. Then there's the math people love to point to, the appearance of something close to the ratio pi and the relationship between the pyramid's perimeter and its height. This one has a genuinely well-supported, unglamorous explanation, and it's worth actually explaining instead of hyping. Egyptian architects built pyramid faces to a seeked, a ratio of horizontal run to vertical rise, essentially their version of a slope specification which they used constantly in construction and which is described in surviving mathematical papyri like the Rhind papyrus. If you choose a seeked where the numbers work out to a clean, easy-to-measure ratio, which Egyptian builders had every practical reason to do, a relationship resembling pi falls out of the geometry automatically. It's a byproduct of a sensible design choice, confirmed by mathematicians and Egyptologists independently, not a coded message. The golden ratio claims some viral videos make are weaker still. They typically rely on selectively choosing which measurements to compare until something lines up close enough, a well-known statistical trap called data dredging. If you allow yourself enough measurements and enough flexibility in which two you divide by each other, you can find almost any ratio you want in almost any large structure. That's not evidence of hidden knowledge. It's evidence of how numerology works. None of that makes the achievement less impressive. If anything, understanding the actual method, trench leveling, stellar alignment, a well-chosen seeked, is more impressive than a vague appeal to ancient secrets because it shows you exactly how skilled these people were, using only the tools of their time. The engineering inside the pyramid is where things get genuinely startling, and this part rarely gets enough attention. Above the king's chamber, deep inside the structure, sit 5 stacked relieving chambers, some containing granite beams weighing up to 80 tons each, hauled from a quarry at Aswan more than 500 miles up the Nile. Those beams were engineered specifically to redistribute the crushing weight of millions of tons of stone above them, away from the ceiling of the chamber below, so it wouldn't collapse under its own mass. 4,500 years later, that ceiling has not cracked. That is not superstition or exaggeration. That is a load-bearing structural solution that modern engineers studying the site have called remarkably sophisticated for its era, and it worked exactly as intended for 45 centuries. How did they move an 80-ton granite block 500 miles and lift it hundreds of feet into the air with no wheels for heavy hauling, no iron tools, no pulleys as we'd recognize them? Papyri, tomb paintings, and physical remains at quarry sites give us real, tested answers. Blocks were moved on wooden sledges over sand that workers deliberately wetted, a technique confirmed both by ancient tomb paintings showing a man pouring water just in front of a sledge and by a 2014 physics study out of the University of Amsterdam, which found that wetting sand reduces friction dramatically, cutting the dragging force needed by up to half. For raising blocks to height, the evidence points to ramps, straight ramps, zigzagging ramps that wrapped around the structure as it rose, or some combination, and in 2018 a French-Egyptian team discovered a genuine construction ramp with 2 staircases and post holes at an ancient alabaster quarry at Hatnub, giving archaeologists physical proof, not just theory, that ramps with supporting structures were an established technique of the era for moving huge stone blocks at a steep incline. Copper tools are another place people assume something's missing. Copper is a soft metal, and it's genuinely hard to picture it cutting limestone and granite. But copper saws used with an abrasive slurry, quartz sand suspended in water or oil, can cut stone effectively because it's the sand doing the cutting, with a copper blade just providing motion and pressure. Archaeologists have found copper tools, saw marks in unfinished stone, and drill cores at Giza and other Old Kingdom sites that match exactly what you'd expect from this method. It's slow. It's labor-intensive. It requires skilled craftsmen and probably no small amount of tool breakage and replacement. But it's fully achievable, and we have the physical tool marks to prove it was actually done this way. So, where does that leave the real mystery? Because there is one, and it's not the one the internet usually reaches for. The genuine open question in Egyptology is not who built the pyramids. That's settled, and settled by mountains of physical evidence, administrative records, worker cemeteries, quarry marks, tool marks, ramps, sledges, and a clear, traceable evolution in pyramid design over decades before Khufu's tomb was ever built. The genuine open questions are things like exactly how the largest stones were lifted onto the pyramid's upper levels, where evidence is thinner and several competing ramp theories remain unresolved, how logistics were coordinated well enough to keep tens of thousands of workers fed, housed, and organized for 20-plus years without the kind of famine or unrest you'd expect from that scale of labor, and how much of this knowledge and organizational capacity was lost in the centuries after the Old Kingdom collapsed, since later, smaller pyramids show a clear decline in quality and ambition. Those are real, actively studied questions, and actual Egyptologists, engineers, and archaeologists publish real research trying to answer them every year. That's also, honestly, why the fabricated version of this story is a shame rather than just harmless fun. The invented claims, impossible precision, secret math, Earth-scale encoding, get repeated so often online that they drown out the actual mystery, which is arguably more interesting. How did a Bronze Age society, without writing systems for advanced mathematics as we understand them, without metal tools harder than copper, without pulleys or wheels for heavy hauling, organize the logistics, the workforce, the quarrying, the transport, and the engineering to build something this precise, this large, and this durable, and do it inside about 20 years? That is an astonishing achievement of human organization, skill, and ingenuity. It doesn't require lost civilizations or non-human visitors to be remarkable. It requires giving Bronze Age Egyptians the credit they're actually due. It's also worth saying plainly, claims that an AI analyzed this and reached a shocking conclusion mainstream historians won't admit should always be treated with some skepticism, no matter which AI system supposedly said it. Large language models don't have secret access to buried data nobody else has, and they don't run independent physical surveys of ancient monuments. When one of these systems is fed a leading question along with cherry-picked numbers, it will often produce a dramatic-sounding answer that reflects the framing it was given, not some independent discovery. If you actually ask a well-informed AI system or a real Egyptologist, did the ancient Egyptians build the pyramids using the methods described in the archaeological record? The honest answer is yes, supported by an enormous and growing body of physical evidence, most of which has only gotten stronger in the last 30 years thanks to discoveries like the Wadi al-Jarf papyri and the Hatnub ramp. None of this makes the Great Pyramid less amazing. If anything, it's more amazing once you understand it wasn't magic. Real people, whose names we've actually recovered from the walls of their own worksite, organized one of the most complex logistics operations in the ancient world, quarried and moved millions of tons of stone with tools you could still find on a hardware store shelf today in principle, if not in exact form, and built something so well-engineered that it has outlasted every civilization that came after theirs. They did it with water levels and star charts and wet sand and ramps and copper saws and quartz slurry, and with a level of organizational skill that modern project managers would recognize and respect. That's not a story about ancient aliens or lost continents. That's a story about what human beings are capable of when they combine patience, observation, and an absolutely relentless attention to detail. So here's the actual question worth sitting with, and it's one I'd genuinely like to hear your take on in the comments. Given everything we now know, the worker villages, the shipping logs, the ramps, the star-based surveying, what do you think was the single hardest problem the builders had to solve? Was it moving the largest blocks up to height? Keeping tens of thousands of workers fed and organized for 2 decades straight? Or something else entirely that doesn't get talked about enough? Tell me what you'd put at the top of that list, and why. And if you want the next video to dig into one specific piece of this, the granite beams from Aswan, the Wadi al-Jarf papyri, or exactly how the ramp systems might have worked, let me know because there's a lot more real evidence here than most videos ever get into.